Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome all of you. This is a lovely time of the afternoon, and thanks for joining us. Noting that it's a Saturday afternoon, and it's the best time and place to be. We're looking at the energy transition. From the South African perspective, I can commit that we are committed to the just energy transition process. For us as South Africa, it's a very important process. We need to address our decarbonization. The horizon of 2030 is looming. CBAM is a reality. Yes, we are in resistance, but it's a matter that we need to address. But we also do know and note that it's not just the electron debate. The hard-to-abate sectors need to be addressed, and the electron cannot liberate us in that sector, and those sectors specifically then from the carbon and the fossil transition. South Africa then heavily committed then to look at the complete value chain of the economy, and that element led us then to the green hydrogen component. A very interesting sector, a dynamic sector, a global sector, globally growing towards a monstrous 330 million tons per annum demand. We know that green hydrogen will move into the 200 million tons per annum demand. And South Africa has got a key competitive advantage, but not in isolation as well, but as the whole of SADC. This afternoon, I've got the privilege that we are also joined online. We are quite grateful then for our colleagues online. Firstly, if I may introduce, we've got Mr. Masopa Moshweshwe, our colleague from Infrastructure South Africa, heading up then specifically on the hydrogen side. We are also then joined by Mr. Tami Mabija, the Head of Department of Economic Development and Tourism in the Northern Cape. And we are joined by Mahendra Rodipal. He is the South African lead on the South African Green Hydrogen Commercialization Strategy, and which we also see additional chapters that was launched this week right here in Dubai. Very exciting times. Afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us as well. As the order of business today, we were looking at Mr. Moshweshwe to just briefly take us through then from the presidency side on the South African view pertaining to green hydrogen and the impetus and the very important notion of support that we as South Africa put forward on that. Mr. Mabija will then subsequently take us through the Northern Cape position. I will do a rapid presentation, and then I really want to say the best part for last is Mahendra on the commercialization side, ladies and gentlemen. Masopa, Mr. Moshweshwe, thank you so much for joining us live from South Africa. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hendrik, and good afternoon to everybody in the room and online. It's really a privilege to be able to address you today. The journey that we've walked with the Northern Cape with respect to green hydrogen is one that has laid the foundation for our national position and is really a lighthouse program which really paints the picture to the potential for the province to industrialize off of green hydrogen, as well as for the country as a whole. So South Africa is fortunate to be able to leverage off of a strong history in green hydrogen, with our Department of Science and Innovation having developed the first Hydrogen South Africa program and roadmap since 2007. So when we started looking at the potential for green hydrogen, or green hydrogen started to emerge as a vector for decarbonizing hard-to-abate sectors, it was off of a strong foundation from a South African perspective. There were interesting developments within the space, especially internationally, with strategies being developed by the likes of Chile, Australia, the European Union, and others. And as a precursor to our Hydrogen Society roadmap, the Northern Cape developed their green hydrogen strategy, which started to paint a picture towards how South Africa could participate and be a major player in this emerging perspective. So that was fortunately followed soon thereafter by the Hydrogen Society Roadmap issued by our Department of Science and Innovation. And as you've said, Mahendra will touch on the green hydrogen commercialization strategy, which really paints a picture to green hydrogen's potential to be a vector for the reindustrialization of the South African economy on a basis which is green. Through this period, South Africa has also developed a country investment strategy, or the South Africa investment strategy. This paints a picture of why South Africa is a leading investment destination and sectors that are already significant recipients of investment, both in terms of foreign direct investment and domestic direct investment, with energy being one of the leading sectors. The South Africa investment strategy has a section which looks at emerging and nascent sectors, ones that we believe will be the future areas of significant potential and growth. These are called the Big Five Frontiers, and green hydrogen is identified as being one of these, as it's able to leverage our significant renewable energy endowment, our locational advantage between European and Far East markets, our significant knowledge and experience in terms of developing grey hydrogen, and the associated skills, our access to the coast and the ports, and significant other elements which place South Africa as a potential leader within the space. But as Hendrik said in the beginning, this is part of a broader discussion around how the South African economy develops and grows. And at the moment, we are faced with challenges of insufficient energy generation, and our transition to green is leveraged off of our ability to be able to leverage our significant renewable energy endowment as a way of developing rapid and cost-effective new energy generation assets. A large part of our Just Transition investment plan focuses on the development of transmission infrastructure to be able to link these centers of renewable energy potential with the load centers. But another important aspect of the Just Energy investment plan is green hydrogen. And as Hendrik said, this is the element which shows how we plan to decarbonize our hard-to-abate sectors. South Africa has the largest industrial base on the continent. And as such, it is important in the context of carbon border adjustment mechanisms and other demand-side risks that we face for us to be able to transition these sectors to green as soon as possible. And we see green hydrogen as a basis from which we can do that. It links our renewable energy endowment with our mineral endowment and gives us the ability to be able to produce value-added products. So as such, South Africa's commitment to a just transition is paramount, and we don't just see it as an obligation to meet our global commitments, but also an opportunity to develop new industries to develop much needed jobs, to develop the requisite skills, and for this to be in a manner which is embedded through industry throughout the country as a whole. So maybe with those few words, I'll hand back to Hendrik, and I wish you well for the remainder of this session this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moshweshwe, or Masopa, as we all know you. From that side, ladies and gentlemen, as just highlighted, the pathway set out there, we want to also extend a tremendous note of appreciation to Infrastructure South Africa and specifically Masopa. These are the foundational founders with the likes of Mahandra, from the IDC side on the commercialization side, that makes this just energy transition possible for us. And then, as also mentioned, this has been a tremendous support for us as the Northern Cape to absolutely unlock the Western SADC belt to complement the Hydrogen Valley as we know it in South Africa, which is more towards the eastern side. And that complement is the synergy that we seek in terms of hydrogen. If I may transition, I would like to then also introduce Mr. Mabija to the floor. And Mr. Mabija from the Northern Cape, the heartland of driving the Western SADC, the green hydrogen strategy. Thank you very much, Mr. Mabija.
No, thanks, Hendrik. Let me just indicate that I would have loved to be on that other side to have this engagement. Let me also thank Masopa for the tremendous work that he's been doing to drive this nascent industry in the country. It's a pleasure really to have this opportunity to just talk about what we're doing on this side, which is the Northern Cape. As a Northern Cape, our vision is quite clear. That is, harness the abundant renewable energy and mineral resources of our province in the Northern Cape, using those two as a trajectory of growth and development for the province. We are partnering with industry leaders like Sasol, Sasol being one of the biggest hydrogen producers. They've got a good track record and they are a global leader as well in realizing this ambition of a green hydrogen ecosystem. This large-scale project that Sasol is undertaking was made a reality through a groundbreaking green hydrogen strategy that was unveiled to the world in COP26 in November 2021. Our commitment to this green revolution has never wavered. We have proudly kept our promise to realize this ambition by crafting the Green Hydrogen Masterplan and achieving the milestones set forth in the South African Just Energy Transition. Renewable energy and hydrogen, the most abundant elements in the universe, is our key to unlocking a sustainable future for the Northern Cape, for South Africa, and for the world. This remarkable element paves the way for meeting our climate commitment, just as we promised when we signed the 2015 Paris Agreement as a country. As a signatory to this pivotal agreement, South Africa is determined to achieve a net zero carbon economy by 2050. Hydrogen will be the linchpin in our journey towards low carbon, eco-friendly tomorrow. Join us in this extraordinary endeavor as we propel our nation and SADC into a brighter and also a greener future. Together we'll shape history and inspire global change. Green hydrogen is a front runner in the race to decarbonize traditionally hard to abate manufacturing industries like cement, steel, ammonia, and plastic, as well as mobility applications like aviation, heavy vehicle transport, and marine industry. Due to its energy density and ability to produce emission-free hydrogen using abundant renewable energy to split water through electrolysis. The Northern Cape has world-class solar and wind endowment for renewable energy generation. The Northern Cape is South Africa's largest and least populated province, with abundant flat land available for renewable energy development. With its coastline of about 300 kilometers, it has the potential to develop a port, and it's a process that we're currently undertaking at Bogobai, allowing maritime trade to connect strategically both the Atlantic and Pacific basins. Green hydrogen has enormous potential to help the Northern Cape realize its industrialization ambition and goals. Green hydrogen, combined with the Northern Cape established mining industry, can cause a paradigm shift in the fortunes of the people of the Northern Cape and the rest of South Africa. It represents a golden opportunity for the country, and particularly the Northern Cape, to address the local challenges of unemployment, inequality, and poverty, as well as the global challenge of climate change. The investment for the 40 gigawatt electrolyzer aspirations that we have is estimated to bring investment between 120 to 200 US billion dollars for hydrogen production facilities and renewables, and an additional investment potential of 180 to 300 US billion dollars for associated industrialization and infrastructure. The Northern Cape Green Hydrogen Master Plan aims to cultivate a spirit of cooperation, inclusiveness, and openness to cater to the unique requirements of every stakeholder and tackle vital elements of the green hydrogen potential. This encourages a harmonious partnership between government, community, business, and experts, fostering growth in this emerging sector. With the support from our national government, the Northern Cape administration has pledged concrete measures to shape a favorable legislative framework, advance the green hydrogen value chain and infrastructure, and champion the economic viability of green hydrogen ecosystem. As I conclude, Mr. Chair, we urge you to join the team, those who are joined virtually and those who are in person, to advance the Northern Cape Master Plan to enable JETP in SADC and the globe. Thanks, Hendrik. That's the statement from the Northern Cape.
Thank you very much, HOD, and we do know and we appreciate you standing in today for Premier Tsamani Sol and MEC Vosloo as well. So we truly appreciate you standing in for us on this Saturday afternoon as well, and it's a privilege having you online. Colleagues, as you can see, the commitment from the Northern Cape not wavering, actually strengthening. As expressed by the HOD as well, by Mr. Mabija, our commitment remained to actually amplify through energy as a critical pillar for enabling of economic growth what we need to achieve as South Africa as JETP, but also what we need to achieve as Namibia and the Western SADC to realize what we put forward in this just energy transition as an opportunity. We deem it to be a tremendous opportunity. I have the privilege now to transition firstly to a presentation that I will do on behalf of a multi-stakeholder partnership who produced it, and I want to appreciate Sasol as a key contributor. I also want to appreciate the World Bank and the GIZ that has also contributed with tremendous substantiation of information and data. And they needless to say, as Mahandra and them that literally hand in glove committed themselves as well to the South African context by saying green hydrogen generation in isolation is not the resolve, but green hydrogen production and the value chain, the upstream and the downstream, will come to fruition to be the real game changer for South Africa and for SADC. Very important for us this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, is as alluded to by the HOD, quite an intimidating picture if you look at that, taking cognizance that the Northern Cape is 1/3 of the South African landmass, but also a key contributor in terms of landmass and resource profile, minerals and energy-wise, for SADC. And we do know that we extend SADC right through up to Angola, Congo, Tanzania, Malawi, coming down south, also Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. And this ultimately then becoming quite a cluster of resource, hydro energy, renewable energies in terms of, in addition, then solar and wind. But furthermore, also a mineral laydown, which is also the new era of minerals. Combined with that landmass is the combination of not just the 54 million square meter hectareage or meters of and low occupation, but also, as alluded to, very complementing topography. And that puts us in a position to also interface then and become a key enabling part of the puzzle between the Eastern Cape, the Western Cape, Namibia, Botswana, but also within the South African context, you will see shortly the interface with other provinces neighboring us, for instance, a Gauteng province, a Northwest province, a Free State province. And this is a dynamic to change the landscape of energy, industrialization, but also reversing some of the extraction theory and resource curse theories we've been experiencing over the years, well, more than a millennia, to bring us back to where we can then also build the economy locally. And there I'm really grateful for Mahendra coming online just after me. Our key sectors that we focus on, ladies and gentlemen, for now is the mineral, mining and mineral beneficiation sector, a key resource for us, 22% of our GDP contribution, but also then focusing on a knowledge economy very strongly. We are not new to the arena of hosting macro projects as the Northern Cape. Having a track record of hosting the Square Kilometre Array and the SALT Telescope projects. This SKA specific here is a global project, a world-renowned project, and we are leading that implementation as the host. The associated business and then furthermore recreational tourism. The manufacturing sector currently lagging, but which we hope with a combination of new sector and energy and human capital, that multi-facet combination making it possible. Agriculture, a key sector for us as well, and we're currently in a peak season as we speak, reaching from October till March. And then construction and infrastructure, preparing ourselves from what is following, as HOD has just mentioned, Mr. Mabija, that we are moving into a new port to be built. We are looking at 100 gigawatt of renewable energy to be constructed and 40 gig of electrolyzer capacity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's an advent of a sector expansion, tremendous. And then based on that, 300 plus kilometer of coastline, fishing and aquaculture. Now, I'm preaching to the converted. For all of us that's online and all over, we do know that we're going to have a rapid change globally, and the hard-to-abate sectors remain those sectors, which is dependent on the nascent sector of green hydrogen, where the electron cannot reach. And this is where we start looking at issues of power generation. We're looking at aviation, shipping, heat for industry. We need to replace and supplement that energy demands as we know it, and we need to decarbonize those needs towards 2050. I do think there's a measure of advancing it sooner through regulation, and I do not want to enter into that global arena of debate and go down the rabbit hole of that debate of CBAM, but it is a reality that is out there to fast track, affecting then tremendously our chemical industries and the related industry, and then furthermore also on that, the cement, the steel industry, and as we go down that line, ultimately food security, because we do know that the chemical industry is the fertilizer industry, the mining industry is the explosives industry. So that has got a knock-on effect throughout the system. As we advance towards 2050, we also note the demand of over 333 million tons per annum in total for hydrogen, and we note that there's a good split of 200 million tons per annum. That is then just on green hydrogen, and that blue hydrogen will still play a role. But as we advance beyond 2050, it's as if the globe has set its sight on 2050. We do know that the right-hand bar on your screen will have to go completely green. Now, in addressing this is the Northern Cape, as mentioned, is not doing this in vain for the Northern Cape. This is a transition for us as SA Inc., but also, as mentioned, for the 16 member states of SADC, but also for the globe, similar fashion of development nations and developing countries. We do know that across the board, developing countries and developmental states share the situation that we have been facing as Africa for more than 100 years, in the South African instance from 1652. And what we have is from that side, as ladies and gentlemen, is a situation whereby we need to reverse global value chains. We need to redefine also the global arena post-Second World War of trade balances, trade monetary sessions, and then also the enablement of value chain placement in relation to energy, capital, and in the extraction point. So for us, when we approach it as Western SADC from an energy perspective, but also as a holistic Africa, from a BRICS premise, but also in addition then from developing countries premise, whereby we need to start looking at how do we access those logistical enablers, those ports. I look at Oman, I look at the critical role just by our neighbors north. I'm looking Namibia, Walfish Bay. I'm looking at Luanda, Angola. I'm looking at Maputo. So these are the elements of interface into the global arena, which we then can start paving the way, because noting that it is a nascent industry, but also a certified industry, we do know that there must be green compliance. It addresses the next barrier, and that is regulatory and policy benefits. We need to start looking at how do we incorporate for certification purpose, but also for local benefit purpose. And then in addition, it says, how do we represent our business case to the likes of the EU, to the likes of what we are seeing where COP is moving, the United Nations is moving, funding institutions. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole again of loss and damage and the likes, but these are the frontiers that we must utilize that can be a win-win for both these parts of the globe. Furthermore, we are looking at the human capital side as well. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, it's a skill set that is new. It's a skill set that expand on what we might have. And we need to get those local skills pools, because part of the empowerment phase is not just the skills pools for employment, but also local industry, local innovation, local technology, and commercialization of that technology. And then last but not the least side is then the high quality employment, but looking at empowerment per se as well, and local ownership will arise from that. What do we approach ourselves on, noting that we say and it's not philanthropic, it's realistic that we need to start leading as consolidated regions with the relevant resources, the infrastructure, the human capital into global trade balances. And that is based on combining resource profiles. Now, if we look at the fact that 60% of the input in terms of green hydrogen is then renewable energies, we had to firstly base it on what Mr. Mabija alluded to and Mr. Moshweshwe. And you can see that as South Africa, in terms of radiation, specifically the Northern Cape, Namibia, is really leading at this stage in terms of solar and radiation exposure. We know if we even combine it on our very own continent in SADC, the East versus the West Coast, for erecting a solar panel on the East Coast of let's say, Mozambique, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, for every one solar panel that you put in the Northern Cape, you need 3 on the eastern side. For every one wind turbine in the Northern Cape, you need at least 2 wind turbines on the eastern side. So the efficiency is out there. We also note, and this is where we always have to say that this is a regional interface, is that we need to negate the fact to utilize a 24-hour operational cycle of energy supply. And for that sake, we need to reduce any dependency on battery storage capacity, our inner battery limits. A wind resource, Pity that the moon is not sufficient for PV exposure at night. But we need a wind resource at night, and that wind resource at the end of the day is a regional resource. It's a time allocation resource to cover those dark times of the day, as we would like to say, in a production cycle of 24 hours a day. And this is where we're looking at the regional interface. Ultimately, what is our aim? To be globally competitive, the notion is that it is not the so-called pink unicorn we're chasing. It's a reality that we have to aim for below $2 to the kilogram in terms of hydrogen and below 600 to the ton in terms of ammonia. All good and well to produce, but the consumer and the global network of consumption need to be also intertwined with the transport modalities, because we do know that for certification purpose, the production, the origin, and then the mode of transport and interface need to be green as well. And in a situation to that, we did the simulations from the Northern Cape Masterplan saying we can produce very competitively based on our energy resource. But having to add then the mobility to market, that is a cost addition to client. And even in that side, we could prove a very, very, very strong business case to be competitive and still deliver to the market at a competitive price margin. Now, pertinent is the global resolve and also looking at the typical trend currently by the EU. As alluded to by Mr. Moshweshwe, currently in South Africa, we are struggling to reach the supply and demand equilibrium in terms of energy. And it is a reality that we are facing. It's a good measure of interface between production and infrastructure to consumer. And as the Northern Cape Masterplan has expanded, we came to the conclusion that we can be a very critical enabler to reach this equilibrium, and green hydrogen will lead, because as mentioned, the key input is renewable energies, and these sources will definitely supplement the South African grid. So from the curtailed energy supply to the peak power supply, that will give us to a grid load measure whereby we can supplement, complement, and this will definitely take the South African grid to a stability point as well. I might just have to allude when in recent engagements with in Europe again, we were severely confronted to be dubbed a energy poor country looking to export hydrogen, which is energy electron dependent. I can categorically state that our oversupply will supplement the grid, and that what we curtail will then transition to enable hydrogen production. And not at all is it going to be a notion of competing electron to household, competing electron to industry, which employ SADC employees. It's going to be a measure of complement and supplement. From our side, that we saw is also leading within the Western SADC region between ourselves, Namibia, Western Cape and Eastern Cape, has led us that moving beyond COP, like Mr. Mabija mentioned in 2021, when we took the bold step, and thank you very much to good partners like Sasol and ESA, who enabled it, we were able to publish the Northern Cape Green Hydrogen Strategy. And subsequently, we found ourselves in those years whereby we said, the strategy is but planning, but we can't be in a lull of planning. We need to transition aggressively towards implementation. And the interface of this is so multi-sectoral, is so multi-regional partner dependent, that it led to the master plan. And that was then the interface of the Northern Cape Green Hydrogen Master Plan, and which we then developed. And this ultimately then is to optimize the regional interface of strategic location, resource, global market potential, local market potential, and also highlighting not just the potential, but what is the enablers required. There are 7 key objectives in this master plan. And as mentioned, the master plan and this nascent sector need to address the issues of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. So our first focus point then there is looking at the maximize of job creation, skills development, and GDP. Our trade balance can really do with a bit of a boost. Our employment figures need a turnaround quite urgently, and for that we need that skills pool in new industry. It's also the strategic alignment tool, because along that value chain of the region and industry and infrastructure partners and global funding partners, we need that central shared road of where we can confluence, when we can have agreement and contribute. Furthermore, is then also is the transparency. A lot of smoke and mirrors surrounding the industry, some dubbing it as snake oil. It is a reality. It is not fiction, it's fact. It is happening. We see it currently in the globe being utilized. The transitional factor in this is also really not difficult if one takes cognizance of the fact that Sasol, which is South African based, is currently the biggest grey hydrogen producer in the world, with 33 countries of export destination and a multitude of clients. So hydrogen is the reality, it is out there, and we need to do this transparent, because it is also for the intensity of the industry to rapidly grow, but also for certification. We also have to see, ladies and gentlemen, that this can't be just a single stage development of being again a source, or origin size. We must basically capture the value chain very importantly. And the master plan at that alluded to the upstream and the downstream, and this is why I'm really privileged to have Mahendra today online as well. We also have to highlight those key success factors. We continuously refer to nascent industry, and nascent industry within itself indicate to us that we need to enable, we need to innovate, we need to addition. And this is where the master plan leads the way as well. And then we need to unlock. For credibility, you need empirical reference of potential and benefit. And from that, you need to identify your ask. The ask is clear. The commitment is right here, right now, and we need to sign on the dotted line. Ladies and gentlemen, what will all of this do? Very important for us that this is part of the SADC strategy. This is unlocking, this is transitioning, as mentioned by Mr. Mosweshwe, and from the Presidential Climate Commission in the last few days, also consistent, is if we as South Africa, as the highest industrialized country and the highest emitter on the continent, do not radically transform our energy source, the sanctioning of the globe as a trade partner for our produce will be jeopardized. Our trade mobility will be inhibited, and therefore we need to transition our energy matrix. Now, looking at a bulk production site, and this is where Buchu Bay and the Northern Cape come into the matrix. It's a bulk production site, regional central in terms of the resource, right on the coastline for desalinated water. We do know sustainable water source is important, sustainable energy source is important, bulk production to reduce costing, and then basically co-locating of industry. And that production predominantly initially focused on the export market. As we export, the funding and the financing will flow as well, the market will flow. But as the globe reaches its price equilibrium as well, we will be in a far better position to also then start feeding the South African economy. Because noting that we need to transform a Secunda, we need to transform a Van der Bijl, we need to transform a platinum belt, we need to transform a manganese and an iron ore belt, we need to transform a heavy hauling industry, we need to transform aviation, ladies and gentlemen. And that pipeline that we are proposing has got twofold. The first point of focus for us will be linking the West Coast and the East Coast. 130 years of development has taken place in South Africa with population density, infrastructure density, industry density along the belt of Gauteng, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and then right up into KwaZulu-Natal. We cannot diminish any of that investment over 130 years in industrialization by not providing it with a good mix of electron and molecule. This economy to sustain and to expand depends on electron and molecule. Furthermore, What we are looking at is, in a partnership with Namibia as well, that we are finalizing and formalizing, is looking at an overproduced supply. We do know, I will not call it a global saturation point, but I think a price tipping point might be the better indication of the globe in terms of consumption and uptake of hydrogen. Will see us moving towards a position where the South African market will become a lucrative market. So, in doing so, Namibia will have overproduce, and that overproduce, excluding then the transport modalities which we had 2 slides earlier, will put us in a position where the pipeline will be the commitment of connection. In addition, we can also look at the commitment towards the Western Cape with the offtake solution of Amplats and going down into Saldanha, aviation fuel, having carbon source, very important resources. And this is the addition in transitioning into PTX. Lo and behold, we alluded extensively to the fact that it's not just a molecule debate. And you will subsequently see the pipeline with the 2 arrows leading through, but just south of that, you will also see a strong 765 kVA molecule to electron, but electron line then, supplementing the South African energy matrix. In essence, doing so, we can then address the electron shortfall, but also supplement with molecule the hard-to-abate sectors. A very important contribution, an urgent contribution in terms of volume and pricing that we need to advance. Now, I'm not going to belabor this slide. It's a very important slide, but I will not do the justice that Mahendra is able to do for us here. And this is just saying the integration and the interface of upstream and downstream. Securing the project, the blue circular, central to all of that, nucleus, yes, definitely. But we do know that if it's not enabled by desalination, electrolysis, synthesis, if we do not start looking at the H2 utilization, the battery parks, the battery utilization, the renewable energy components, the fertilizer components, and if we do not ultimately have that filter into the societal, socio-economic realities of SADC, this will be a fatal flaw, and it will be an artificial over-implosion, which we cannot, as Africa, repeat. Just in terms of the whole process, ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, when we preach it's a just energy transition, that just is not just do it like Nike. That just stand for justice, ladies and gentlemen. I want to repeat that today. If we do not achieve distributive justice, restorative justice, and procedural justice in this process, once again, it will be a fatal flaw. It will not be owned by us. It would have been imposed by us. It would have been introduced to us. So we need to own it, and that process need to see to those 3 pillars of justice. And I want to emphasize and correctly stated from the previous slide, it's an up and a downstream. That justice we must achieve from land acquisition process. Here I want to give a shout out to the Richtersveld Community Property Association, the Richtersveld community, our Nama community, which is the primary recipients, but also our circular regional recipients and communities. Those are the owners of these projects. These are the owners that we must empower through co-ownership of enterprise, through co-ownership of employment, but also with a future that they can embrace. So that justice must lead the way in this just energy transition. But ladies and gentlemen, and I just want to bob back to this slide, that justice cannot just be on the western side of SADC with the new potential. That justice must speak for the eastern side, where we need to address the fears of our population, our brothers and sisters that is captured currently in a fossil economy. We cannot lose a single fossil employee in this process. We must addition. We must create new future for our fossil employees as well. And this is where that justice need to find that balance. Just in terms of keynotes, I don't want to belabor it again, just pertaining to this being a global platform. I think very important for us, it is a balanced energy solution. We note additionality. It is additionality, it's supplementing the grid. It is not utilizing then energy from our current energy poverty solution. It will contribute towards the energy equilibrium. I need to elaborate on how do we empower and enable this. We need to drive the integration and rollout of critical infrastructure through a PMO, the national system. This is where we're grateful for the PCC, what the PCC has announced this week, what we profoundly saw also from the commitment from the financiers. And the lead needs to be taken by the Transnets, the Escoms, the SANRALs. For instance, what are we going to do about the social dynamics of housing and settlement development and expansion? Because the balance needs to be restored. We need to enable the reduction of cost of capital and access to competitive funding. A lot of the negotiations this week at COP28 was dealing with that notion. We need to access it equitably, very importantly. We need to relook terms, and we need to look at grant, co-locating, co-funding, and commitments as well to unlock some of these barriers. We also have to look at unlocking access to markets through bilateral agreements. As South Africa, I want to compliment again the presidency and Masopa for tremendous work, a year of highlights between Japan, Germany, Brussels, the Netherlands. We saw this moving. We agree as country to country. Namibia in the folds. But this is where we need to create that, and we need to create the surety of those offtakes, those funding solutions. And then last but not least is we need to support a responsible and efficient environment management process. Ladies and gentlemen, when you tread, you need to tread softly. A lot of people will say the Northern Cape and Namibia and Western Cape, Eastern Cape is desert and it's amplified nature and there's a lot of nature. No, it's a soft creation. It's an interface ecosystem. This is why the Northern Cape has currently committed ourselves after a lot of resistance from the global West and the Northern Hemisphere on the implication of a big project like this, engaging in a strategic environmental analysis of over 4 million hectares. This is to have the cumulative effect of an implication of a project from transitioning, from generating, from transport. What does it mean? How do we mitigate that? And therefore, we do deem this to be also a learning curve for us to see how we can do socio-environmentally, socio-economically, socio-politically, and this should guide the process. Ladies and gentlemen, all of that I've just told you is not fiction, it's reality. Because we know that Sasol, a South African and a New York Stock Exchange listed company, the project Lighthouse investors, as alluded to by Mr. Moshweshwe and Mr. Mabija, very importantly said, they have committed themselves. Last week, Friday, an international publication saw the light, and Sasol going to market with a structured transaction or investor interest form. And I want to urge you to please look at that data and note that the full feasibility study and investment state is ready. Transnet has issued the RFQ. Transnet has in addition furthermore extended for the RFP process in Notion. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the advent of putting the infrastructure in place, putting the investment in place in reality. My privilege is now then ultimately to also hand over to Mahendra online. As mentioned, this is focused predominantly on the generating side. But the real value is in expanding and capturing the up and downstreaming. I would like then to introduce Mahendra Rodipal. Thank you so much for joining on that side, sir.
Thank you, Hendrik. Can I please confirm that you can see the presentation?
Super.
Thank you. It's always difficult speaking after you, Hendrik, because you don't leave much for me to say. But I'm glad you're so passionate about this. So thank you, everyone. And looking at the SA Pavilion, I wish I was really there. My talk is entitled Green Hydrogen Commercialization in South Africa, which is a path towards industrialization, decarbonization, and socio-economic upliftment. So by way of introduction, I'm working at the Industrial Development Corporation, and quickly it's a development finance institution owned by the government. And why I'm talking to you about this from a DFI is because some background, Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition has set up a green hydrogen panel and tasked us with doing a commercialization strategy, leveraging off what the Department of Science and Innovation did in terms of the Hydrogen Society roadmap that was developed. We developed this commercialization strategy and action plan, which was approved in Cabinet in 18th of October. We use this to also feed into the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, which was released in, approved and released by Cabinet in November. So I think Hendrik showed the importance of the Northern Cape strategy. I want to give you a picture of the national strategy, but very importantly, why the Northern Cape strategy is such a key enabler in the implementation of the national commercialization strategy. The problem statement for us is twofold. We're starting off with premature, what we call premature deindustrialization, where the manufacturing component of the GDP has been low and dropping. In parallel to that is the need to decarbonize, where the role of hydrogen is seen as, doing that last 20 to 30% of decarbonization that renewable energy alone cannot do. And this all has to be done within a just energy transition pathway, and hence the JET IP document that was also released recently. The solution to this problem statement, we released this paper in Dubai on last Sunday, and basically it's called Pathways to Sustainable Industrialization, wherein we show the 4 pathways, and within that, catalyzing low carbon and green growth, under which green hydrogen new industry commercialization falls. So a bit of a history, and I mentioned, the DSI was very instrumental from 2007 in developing this industry with a number of demonstration projects. Then we moved into this commercialization phase around June 2021, where we started the hydrogen panel to do the commercialization strategy. Very early, there's it here. COP28 is when the Northern Cape released its strategy. It was a long time ago. So they were really the leaders in the space from a provincial perspective. We also know that, as Masopa mentioned, this was also supported by the presidency as one of those key investment pathways also. So this journey has brought us now to focusing on commercialization, and hence comes the Green Hydrogen Commercialization Action Plan. I think it's important to show the value chain, and the reason I want to show this is that it is very important that we, not just in South Africa, but as African nations, as we mentioned in the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance forum also, is that we need to play to our strengths and use and leverage our competitive advantage. In this regards, we need to understand what's those focus areas from a commercialization perspective for us. I've shown some of this here. I think you need to recognize the export component and the domestic part of it. I think Hendrik spoke a lot about this, but the important thing for us to realize is that there's 3 parts to it. It's the upstream production part, where we can produce chemicals that we want to export. There's the downstream applications, like in green steel, fertilizer, vehicles. We're looking at marine bunkering, but very importantly, from an industrialization perspective, is what we call this midstream. And this entails basically the demand pool that this will create for equipment manufacturing in the country, that we need to take full advantage in addressing that premature deindustrialization that we spoke about. If I can get back to the next slide, there we go. So in summary, the opportunity is framed like this. It's firstly a market-driven commercialization. Hendrik spoke about the export market targets. We have positioned ourselves within that, and we have quantified that in the commercialization strategy. It's an industrialization opportunity, as I mentioned, because of our ability to cut across many sectors and reindustrialize. With that will come infrastructure build, And obviously, it's a decarbonization opportunity. And so what we've done is we ran all that numbers through a macroeconomic model to estimate the socioeconomic benefits for the country. And we know there's, what we have come out with is a significant increase in GDP and jobs created. At the same time, we need to take advantage of proactively addressing previously disadvantages communities and groups, gender equality and social inclusion. So as I mentioned, we're well positioned, and I think you've heard a lot about this. We have sufficient land, we have renewable energy resources, but what is important for us and to really differentiate ourselves is that base of Fischer-Tropsch technology, firstly, which will allow us to produce those green petrochemicals with green hydrogen, and that endowment of PGMs that can go into the equipment that we want to produce. Can South Africa do it? This is something you can look on this website, where you see that by 2045, we have the potential to be the lowest cost producer. So the colors indicate the cost of green hydrogen, and we are right down here by 2045. But I think if you look at this map, we're not alone. So we're going to be playing in a very competitive global arena. Some of our competitors like Chile and Australia will get there a few years before us if you look at this, if you go and study this online. So the message here is that we need to differentiate ourselves and at the same time move with speed. What's driving that cost reduction? We've seen a significant decrease in renewable energy prices in the country. This is the actual decrease that we see, and we project that going down further. But at the same time, we've seen reports showing that due to economy of scale production, electrolyzer costs are also going down. And both of these key drivers, we believe, will stand in good place for us to target that low cost production. And essentially what we're saying is as prices decrease, there's a feed forward effect that will allow us to successively then penetrate many different other industries, as I showed in the value chain chart. We do recognize we're approaching this industry with challenges, and I will go quickly through them and basically touch on how we're addressing these challenges in the commercialization strategy. There's the issue of the green premium, where your green products will be at a premium compared to your traditional products. Awareness of green hydrogen is a concern. There's energy security issues, and to talk about that. There's policy alignment from a government perspective, which I think we have addressed largely. Infrastructure coordination is a key focus going forward. So is funding. We're starting to source a lot of funding, but we need to source more. It's also the type and the quantum of funding that's significant. There's a myth about the transportation cost, that we want to transport green hydrogen, and that's the reason we're targeting ammonia and new chemicals. And there's a myth about that it's intensive on the water, which is not really true, and I will touch on that a bit further. So one of the challenges that I showed there was the energy security, and the message is very importantly is that we're not going to allow green hydrogen to compete for electrons that's meant to electrify right now in the context of our energy crisis. I think there's firstly a timing issue, where we know by the projects that's being developed will only come online around 2025 and 2026. And by that time, our NECOM plan would have largely addressed the energy shortfall. But in addition to that, I think the important message from an electricity perspective is that the green hydrogen projects are not going to be actually a load on the grid. In fact, it will be able to actually curtail excess energy or electricity from the plants into the grid and be an enabler of transmission infrastructure. And what I mean by that is green hydrogen projects that need to be connected to the grid will fund the infrastructure for their grid connections, but those infrastructure changes that they make will allow additional renewable energy projects. We have a large amounts of developed projects that weren't approved because of grid connection. By addressing grid connection for green hydrogen projects will enable other renewable energy projects to then feed into the grid, and that's a very important connection that we need to take full advantage of. The water issue that I mentioned, I think we ran the numbers, and it's a myth that because you need water, you need a lot of it. It's not true. There's a CSR paper on this also that you can read. And the second, I think, myth that we want to debunk here is that the cost is not significant. The cost of desalination as part of the whole component is about 1 to 2%. And in fact, the paper that I mentioned, the CSR wrote, says that why not use that as an advantage and upscale your desalination part of the hydrogen by 300%, which will have a minimal impact on your hydrogen cost, but will allow you to then provide access water to communities. So another way we can leverage, the whole challenge about water in addition addressing socioeconomic needs. The other challenges I mentioned was infrastructure coordination and transmission grid, which I already talked about. Ports, a key part of the Bukobai strategy and the Northern Cape strategy. And Bukobai is a greenfield port. We want to put a big focus on developing that, but we also have the Saldanha and the Kruger, which are brownfields that can serve as early offtake and export ports for us. And then transportation, Hendrik spoke about that important master plan around the pipelines. We've have production targets for the country in the commercialization strategy, as shown here, kind of equal for export and domestic. Export between 4 to 8 million tons by 2050, domestic 3 to 6 million tons. These are conservative numbers, and these were the numbers that we used to generate the impact on the socioeconomic for the country. It is a ramp up from now to 2050, and with that comes the need for funding, which is also seen as a ramp up and went into the input into the JET IP document. So the approach is anchored on 6 key elements. As I mentioned, exports is addressing the price premium for us by ensuring that we take full advantage of pricing subsidies. Domestic market will address decarbonization, but also industrialization. And it's about looking at those low-hanging fruit opportunities, green fertilizer driven by CBAM. Hendrik spoke about CBAM, potentially a low-hanging fruit fertilizers because how expensive it is for us to import. And then the third aspect is, together with that, is supporting localization. Now, when you support localization, we look at the value chain, not just your electrolyzers and fuel cells, but we also look at the demand pool for renewable energy components like PV and batteries and wind components. The fourth element is securing funding, which we're very busy with, but it's crowding in partnerships and also getting in things like grants and concessional debts. We have already set up a grant funding arrangement with the KfW for green hydrogen, and now also a $1 billion fund that we're developing, which is a concessional debt facility. Together, we need to ensure that we address the socioeconomic aspects proactively, and this all needs to be supported in the sixth element being the role of government in creating the conducive environment for investment that's addressing policy, regulations, and potentially incentives in future. Is this all talk? Are we seeing progress? And I've listed some of the progress that we've seen recently. Hendrik already spoke about this, so I don't want to go into too much of detail. But it's good to see, as my last bullet says, the 19 projects that were actually in the Government Gazette in December 2022, which I want to touch on a bit more. I've got a bit of wind here. Give me a second. So these projects, these 9 projects that you see on your screen were given SIP status, Strategic Integrated Project status, meaning, amongst other things, that's a strong support from government to ensure that they're fast-checked, especially from the regulatory perspective. This information is available in the public domain. I can showcase 4 of them just to show you the things that are happening on ground. One is the Hive Kruger Green Ammonia project in Kruger. It's a 3 gigawatt project targeting green ammonia exports to the east. The second one is a fuel cell manufacturing project in the Vaal region in South Africa. Third one is green steel production at ArcelorMittal facilities in Saldanha, which, as I mentioned, is an important part of decarbonization of steel to address CBAM. And then we've got the Sasol aviation fuel. 4 projects I want to showcase, but they're not the only 4. If you look at the JET IP document now, you'll actually see the list of projects have grown to about 24 that are being developed right now. So the key messages that I show here is, firstly, South Africa has a unique value proposition, as I mentioned. The export and local demand opportunity needs to be taken full advantage of. We have a way of addressing water and energy security issues. Industrialization and local manufacturing is a key enabler on getting prices down and addressing the premature deindustrialization that I mentioned and decarbonization of hard-to-abate sectors. Industrialization strategy and action plan is an opportunity for the country, for South Africa, for energy security, economic development, skills development, employment, and community participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mahendra, and compliments to you and the team of IDC, and specifically you leading that work stream. I think a tremendous effort from South Africa and by the IDC. We are really grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, that presentation, as mentioned by Mahendra, accessible as well online. Also, the Northern Cape Masterplan, accessible online. We would like to urge all of you to engage with that. I know our contact details is available as well. I've been informed that we've reached the end of our session, and I want to firstly appreciate all our members online. Thank you so much for joining us, Mahendra, Mr. Mabija, Mr. Moshweshwe. I would like to also extend to appreciate Mr. Kruger, also from the Northern Cape, joining us, everybody in the audience and all our online colleagues then. This is not the end. Myself in the audience, I want to say thank you to Mr. Sean Modise and Mr. Rian Worry also joining me. We are available for you to be battered with questions and clarity. And then also for any further email follow-ups, please see the YouTube channel, NBI, COP28, and then Office of the CEO at neda.co.za. You can reach us, and we are more than willing to share with you. From our side, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and do enjoy the evening. Thank you.